Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. A 4th grader's revenge. This happened many moons ago. I can't say it's ProRevenge. But for a 4th grader it's epic. We had a homeroom in school. The room you started your day in. The one where you kept your stuff, like school supplies and most importantly our lunch. So beginning of the day we leave everything in the desk. Which is where we were told to keep everything. Class ends, I pick up the needed school supplies and book for the next couple of classes plus PE. A few classes later we go back to homeroom. Where we have a class, then we break for lunch period. One day I went to get my lunch and one half of it was gone. Putting few pieces of candy. I told my teacher that someone had stolen part of my lunch. She assured me no one had taken my food. I explained that yes, my food is missing. She still said no one took my food. I couldn't understand why she wasn't comprehending what I was saying. I'm right next to her desk telling her. She said lunch is about to begin and to go sit down before the bell rings. I said I will, but first I need you to understand what I'm saying. Someone has taken my lunch. Again she said I was mistaken. I said I don't understand why you can't just investigate what happened. Now it's getting real. She said it's lunchtime and I needed to go to the cafeteria. I said why? Someone ate my lunch. I have nothing to eat. She told me if I didn't leave, she would take me to the principal's office. I said great, let's go because I'm not leaving until you do something. She said okay, I'll do something. I said great, thanks. What are you going to do? She said she didn't have time to deal with me, so I left. Next day I was missing another treat from my lunch. Now understand, I'm poor, that meal is all that I have. My mom and dad are piece of crap on drugs. So I make my own lunch. Which tends to be a jelly sandwich if we have it. And candy from Halloween or something. This particular week my brother and I scored on pudding. And I had yet to eat any. Because some little jerk absconded with my stuff. So I brought this up to my teacher and again she didn't want to hear about it. So I went to the principal's office during lunchtime myself to file whatever grievance a 4th grader could do. At least the principal heard what I had to say. Monday morning came and my teacher was pissed. I went to the principal. She scolds me in front of the other students saying I'm a tattletale. No one likes a narc, lol. Not cool. I just sat there and said nothing. When I got home I told my mom and dad. Their solution was for me to take my lunch with me. I did think about that. But I didn't because it was a hassle to carry everything, plus to put it in a safe place. One class was PE, physical education. That's just not right, so I didn't. Their idea sucked. My idea was genius. I had a big Tootsie Roll like the size of an adult's finger. They are so good, I hate to ruin it. But what a great cause. So it took my dad's drill motor, chucked up a large size drill and bored out enough of the Tootsie Roll to load it up with 5W transmission fluid. I capped it with the shavings that I bored out, wrapped it back up and my trap was set. It looked great. Tootsie Roll are a little oily on the outside because of heat or the makeup of the candy itself. I was so proud of myself. For the craftsmanship I used for the devious idea. This was going to work. I didn't tell anyone of my plan. Not my mom and dad or my little brother. In the back of my head I kept thinking, who is doing this? My brother? My teacher? She hated me. I was a smart kid, always did my stuff but with a attitude. I looked like a hippie bell-bottoms ZZ top t-shirt. Not proper for rednecks in Oklahoma. But I just didn't know. I soon found out what period my food was being taken and by whom. It was this ginger kid, fat tub of shit, who was related to of all people my teacher. How? I can't remember, but they were kin. I was taken to the principal's office. I'm thinking I'm getting an award for finding a thief. Nope, I'm getting yelled at. It took me a second to comprehend I was being reprimanded. I had enough of adults pushing me around making me feel like the bad guy. I explained to both of them that I didn't give Fat Ginger permission to eat my food. Why is he sick? Did he eat something that wasn't his? Did anyone think that stealing someone's food is wrong? But I'm the bad guy. I hate to tell you, but Ginger is going to die. I put cyanide in the food from rat poison. He had already been taken to the nurse office. Principal and teacher started to freak out. I started laughing, said it was only transmission fluid. They were going to give me paddling. I explained that was never going to happen. My mom and dad have to be present. So let's get them here and see if they agree with me, the victim or you who didn't listen or do anything to protect me. My mom might be a lot of things, but when it comes to her kid being bullied, she went off on them. I was in the outer office hearing her go off on them. When she came out, I asked her if I was the winner. She said, "Yes baby, you showed them. You're the winner." Story 2. They tore up my grandfather's garden, he tore up their car. My dad told me this story a few years back. My grandfather lived in a really rural area in Georgia. This was around the late 1930s, early 1940. My grandfather owned a farm and had a garden. He had planted various veggies. Well, the only neighbors were about a mile away. And for some reason the neighbors would drive their Model T through the garden, tearing up the veggies. My grandpa would have to replant the garden. The neighbors kept doing this. So here comes the revenge part. My grandfather dug holes around the garden and stuck metal poles into the holes. He covered up the holes with leaves. A few days later the neighbors drove through again. My dad said they tore the undercarriage out and had parts strewn all over the place. He couldn't remember what happened after that. But I don't think they did that again. Story 3. I went from school teacher to chairman of the board of a big company for the sake of revenge. When I was a tiny kid, my father was my best friend. He worked multiple jobs to support my family, all while powering his way through law school. He even built a couple of small businesses from the ground up with a couple of his friends. All while doing this, he managed to be the best dad ever, spending as much time as he could with my mother, myself and my baby siblings. One day, we found out that he had stage 4 stomach cancer, the kind that you don't recover from. My mother and I stayed by his side all the way till it was all over. The last memory I have of my father was when he was completely immobile, practically a vegetable at this point with tubes going in and out of his body, and me just praying that he'd still be able to remember who I was. All the guy could do was smile at me just to let me know he still recognized his son, even if the doctors told us most of his memories would be gone. Eventually, he fell into a coma for some days before waking up to say goodbye to my mother, who was by his side when he died. She was a housewife, so we really didn't have much to go on after his death. Enter my grandfather. He was one of those self-centered boomer types who makes everything about himself. After my father died, he'd use the newspaper obituary to boast about his dead son's grades and achievements, which I realized seemed to be the only thing my dad was to him. Just in case you were wondering, yes, we are Asian. My mother was grieving and trying to find a way to make ends meet, and my grandfather graciously offered to help her control my father's 2 businesses to help support us. My mother agreed because she didn't have any experience. While we grew up, the 2 businesses didn't provide much for us, likely because my father was one of the big reasons they were thriving. Mom was in and out of multiple jobs just to keep us floating. My grandfather offered to help put me and my siblings through school. I managed to score some scholarships with some good schools growing up, so thankfully he didn't have to do as much for me, but we were really glad that he helped out with my siblings. After I made it out of school, I found out that my family was broke and my 2 siblings were still making their way through medical school. My sister even offered to stop and just get a job, but I told her to keep going because she was doing so well and that she deserved to graduate. My grandparents had cut us off because they didn't approve of the directions my siblings took in life, especially my sister, who was, for them, too female to have a career in medicine. My grandmother is a bit of a misogynist. Why are you wasting your time and money becoming a doctor? You're just going to have children and quit. I was working as a high school teacher when I was contacted by one of my dad's old business partners for one of his companies. After I asked him about how the company was doing, he told me that my grandfather, who was still in control of my father's shares, was siphoning money from the company for himself, and he was earning way more than he was giving me and my siblings for our education. So all our lives he'd been making us feel indebted to him for money that was supposed to be ours to begin with, and he lied to us by telling us that Dad's companies weren't making any money for us at all. We also realized that when he cut us off, he was cutting us off from our own money, forcing my siblings to drop out and give up careers that they'd been working their whole lives for. What's worse is that this was our father's money, and we know that he'd wanted it to help us provide for our futures even after he died, and here comes his asshole father basically shitting on his legacy for his own enrichment. I even found out that he used his position to take possession of the company's office space and forced them to set up shop in a smaller, cheaper office while renting the original space out under his own name to the company's competitors to make money from them too, all while I had to work multiple jobs to help my mother and siblings pay the bills. Cue revenge. My grandfather's biggest weakness has always been his pride. In fact, I suspect that he wanted us to think he was helping support us out of his own pocket because he wanted everyone to think he was some kind of hero when in reality he was financially choking us. I recognized that no matter what my grandfather said, my siblings, my mother and I were legally the owners of my father's company shares. So after having a statement signed by the three of them, I approached all the board of directors sans my grandfather and let them know that I was now that sole representative of my late dad's estate. My grandfather also made himself chairman of the board. According to the company records, he did no work for the company at all, so the position was just a name that allowed him to receive money, so I convinced them that since he was only chairman as representative of my father's estate, that made me the chairman. I did not intend to keep the position because I did not have the experience for it. Then I contacted other members of my extended family about my grandfather's unethical practices with the company's office space. He was eventually pressured by them into evicting the company's main competitor from their office space. Serves them right for conniving with my grandfather to take the company's old office space. At the next board meeting, I prepared for the moment I'd been waiting my entire life for. When he entered the conference room, to preside over the meeting as the chairman, he found his chair facing away from the table with all the board members already seated at the table, and like a Bond villain, I spun the chair around to reveal to him that I'd been the one sitting there the entire meeting. I told him that the company and my family no longer needed him and that I'd be taking control over representation of my father's estate. Do you know that I'm the one who put him and his siblings through school? He said in shock. I only went no. Dad did. The look of sheer embarrassment on his face was perfect. I've never seen him look defeated my entire life until that moment, and this sort of satisfaction could not be achieved by simply ratting him out. I stepped down from the chairman position and took a job in the company's treasury department as a bookkeeper with a meager salary, but at least now any profit sharing or dividends that the company released would go where my father wanted it to go. And finally, one of the first decisions I got to make as a board member before stepping down was to give my mother a permanent job that she deserved. My grandfather is now jobless. He spends all his time at home, and because he spent his life being selfish and self-centered, he has no friends. All he had going for him was being able to power trip over other people and boasting about his assets and achievements. Even my grandmother has had it with him, and the two don't even sleep in the same room anymore. I hope he lives the rest of his short life regretting that he didn't live his life with more compassion and humility. Edit. I've gotten a lot of. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.